Hello and welcome to the State of the Fleet Industry, a weekly video series produced by Automotive Fleet Magazine. I'm Mike Antich, editor of Automotive Fleet, and today I'd like to examine what's occurring in the commercial fleet market as of the week of July 20th, 2020. Now this is our 14th week in producing the weekly video series, The State of the Fleet Industry, and it's been quite a roller coaster ride when you look back on things. When we started the 2020 calendar year, the country was in the midst of its longest economic expansion ever, and one economic record after another was being broken. And less than 3 months into the 2020 year, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and it triggered the deepest downturn in economic output and employment in this country since World War II, and it also triggered an unprecedented shutdown of all non-essential businesses. So despite this deep economic downturn, we do have positive news that's emerging. And one recent piece of positive news was issued by the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, in their July 2020 monthly report. And the Congressional Budget Office forecasts that if current laws stay in place that are governing federal taxes and spending, that the economy is forecast to grow at an annual rate of 12.4% for the second half of 2020. Now 12.4% is a record-breaking number, and the country has never experienced that level of economic growth since World War II. However, it does temper this forecast by saying that the full recovery to pre-pandemic levels will not occur until the middle of 2022. Now, this isn't bad, although it's later, but think back on what was said earlier and where we were at pre-pandemic levels. We were at historic norms in terms of the overall economy. So this is, in my mind, good news in that in the space of a year and a half, the CBO is projecting that we should be returning to these levels. But as I said before in prior State of the Fleet Industry videos, the biggest difficulty that we have, or in particular I have, with the current economic condition is that since the pandemic is the root cause of our current economic difficulties, there's no specific endpoint to this crisis, at least until a vaccine is developed. So times are still tough. We've got a deep hole that we still need to dig out of. As recently as the beginning of the first week of July, the U.S. Labor Department reported that there were 1.3 million new jobless claims, which is incredible. Since March, the country has experienced 16 consecutive weeks of record levels of layoffs. Altogether, that represents a loss of 14.7 million jobs, which really is at Great Depression records. On the other hand, we've seen record job creation during the month of May, and then that record was broken by another record which doubled the number of jobs created in June. And you can see that in the chart that's being shown here. The red bars show the dramatic decline that we experienced up through the month of April, and then our turnaround with the job creations in the month of May, and then later in the month of June. But as you can see, there's still a long way to go, and despite the fact that these were record job creation months, May of 2020 and June of 2020, we still have a ways to go to get back to pre-pandemic levels. The other good piece of news is that gasoline prices continue to remain steady. As of today, July 20, the nationwide national average was at $2.19, and it remained steady with what prices were the week prior. So let's next examine what's occurring in the wholesale used vehicle market. And this is a market that's extremely critical for commercial fleets. And as an update, the month of July continues to be strong in terms of auction sales and prices as it was in June and in the preceding month of May. And this is primarily being driven by the influx of federal stimulus monies, primarily into lower economic strata, people that are the primary buyers of used vehicles. And the secondary factor is that it continues to be a limited inventory of used vehicles in the wholesale market. So these two combined are creating strong sales for vehicles that are being sold at auction, and also generating good prices for those vehicles that are sold there. And actually, the auction sales levels have returned to what we were selling pre-COVID-19. So the volume remains very strong in terms of what's going on at auctions. Now, most auctions continue to sell vehicles online, which again is good news, because it's really been a dramatic transformation to sell this volume of vehicles online. But again, dealers are creatures of habit. They want their physical auctions or physical sales to return, and they're being very vocal about the fact on wanting that. And most independent auctions have accommodated dealers by opening physical auctions. Likewise, Odessa and Mannheim have also been opening their physical sales. And just last July 13th, Mannheim announced that it has opened an additional 13 locations for dealers to come and bid live in lane. So while used vehicle inventory is growing in the wholesale market, most auctions still continue to operate at reduced staffs. Now, the auction industry is no different than all of the other industries within the country. They've gone through a series of furloughs among their staff, and although auction volumes have returned to pre-COVID levels, many auctions still have not brought back all of their furloughed staff. And the reason for that is understandable. The auction owners don't know how long this uptick in activity is going to be occurring, and you don't want to bring people back and then furlough them again a second time. But the fact that auctions are operating with this limited staff is creating problems. Dealers are complaining that it's creating constraints in the auction sales process. And in particular, since most vehicles are being sold online now, dealers are very dependent on the accuracy of these condition reports of the vehicles being sold. And the dealers are complaining that due to these staffing constraints, the condition reports often don't match, or sometimes don't match, the condition of the actual vehicle that they're purchasing online. But regardless, bidding activity hasn't slowed down. It continues to remain strong. In fact, we're starting to experience no sales, where the consigners are actually sticking to the floor prices, and if they're not getting them, they're no selling the vehicles, and they go on sale at the next sale. So although the wholesale used vehicle market has been benefiting from the limited inventory that's out there, this isn't going to last forever. And in fact, we can already see what's going to be coming in the second half of 2020. There will be a large influx of new inventory that's going to be entering the marketplace, and it's going to be coming from several different sources. Currently, and preceding this, there's been a moratorium in place of repossessions on vehicles, along with other aspects of the economy, such as apartment evictions for non-payment of rent, mortgage foreclosures because of non-payment or late payments in terms of mortgages. These will be coming to an end. These moratoriums are not going to go on indefinitely. So most of these institutions are anticipating a dramatic increase in repossessions. And I know anecdotally, in speaking with people who manage portfolios for major financial institutions, they're being told by their management to start staffing up, making sure that they can accommodate this increased influx of repossessed vehicles. So the other factor that's going to be increasing the inventory of used vehicles in the wholesale market is lease returns. Now, in January of 2020, we already knew how many lease returns were going to be entering the marketplace in this year. And that was actually going to be a record volume of 4.1 million vehicles. But once the pandemic started, it caused most manufacturers to cease production of new vehicles. And at this point, when lessees were getting ready to return or to come out of their old lease, there was no new vehicle for them to go into. So at that point, lessors started encouraging lessees to have a lease extension and to push further out their lease return into 2020 when they would be able to get a replacement vehicle. The consequence of this is that there's an additional 560,000 lease returns that will now be entering the wholesale market in the second half of 2020, in addition to the ones that were already scheduled to re-enter the marketplace at that time. And the concern is that the combined pressure of increased repossessions or repo vehicles, along with this increased or record volume of off-lease vehicles, that's going to put downward pressure on overall used vehicle prices for the second half of the year. But the good news is if you look at this chart, most vehicle segments are doing well. In particular, your subcompact crossovers, as you can see, are doing extremely well, as are compact crossover SUVs. Small pickups are doing extremely well, as are compact vans. So for the time being, resale values are doing good, but inventories will be increasing, and everybody sees that coming, and they're gearing themselves up for this current situation. So with that, I'd like to make a closing observation on another interesting tidbit that kind of affects my business in particular, and that is that the International Air Transport Association has made its forecast, and it said air travel will not return to pre-COVID levels until the year 2023. So that's not good news in terms of conference attendance, and it's not good news for rental companies that are reliant upon renting vehicles to air travelers. But with that, that concludes my State of the Industry presentation for the week of July 20th, and I'd like to thank you for listening.